So I popped out to Romans International to go for a test drive in the Mercedes-AMG GT. Effectively, the first time I've properly driven either a GT or a GTS. Although I'm sure you saw I drove the GTR at the press launch at Portimao, and I'm rather excited about it because I have one on order. Now, when I ordered the GTR, I expected it was going to arrive in March or April, just in time for the rally and road trip season of 2017, which typically is April, May, June, and I do a lot of miles in those months. However, realistically, my car's going to be a little bit later. It's going to be somewhere in summer, maybe July, maybe August, September. We will have to see in due course. So in the meantime, I was playing with the idea in my mind of jumping into a temporary GT or GTS, hence my video, hence the title, Should I Buy an AMG GT? Now, I've waited to shoot this video now until later in the evening, so I've had time to read some of your comments and get your feedback and thoughts on that sort of question. Now, there's been an awful lot I hadn't necessarily thought about, but the first thing I just need to clarify is that no man needs as many cars as I have. I know that, but I do a lot of driving and I shoot an awful lot of content for here on YouTube, also for Instagram and Facebook. So I think it's quite interesting to use different cars for different purposes and use them a lot. I do an awful lot of miles in every car. So what I want to talk about now, basically, is what I do with each of my cars, the trips I've got coming up, and why I'm thinking about doing this. Jumping that order around a little bit, I'm going to get started firstly with some of the trips that are coming up and why I'm going to be doing quite so many miles this year. I think that will go a decent way towards explaining some of this. So please excuse the cheesy scene change. We're now in front of the McLaren, which is nicely tucked away here under the cover, and I've also just noticed quite how yellow the lighting is down here. I'm sorry about that. So as I was saying, this year is basically an overload. I have never been this far planned ahead for the trips that I've got coming up, and there is an awful lot of content. It's all in the pursuit of some pretty cool videos, and I'm going to have a lot to share with you, which I'm obviously quite excited about, and I hope you are too. But it's going to get started in February. My first trip doesn't actually involve any of my cars. I'm heading around Europe, Germany and the Alps, and I'll be doing that in a new Porsche Panamera. So I'm looking forward to driving the new Panamera actually. And then from there, I'll be going on various flights to press launches and things, out to the Middle East for a little bit and back again. And basically the whole month is gone. I think I have like 3 nights or 4 nights in the whole of February at home. Then we get to March, and it's the Geneva Motor Show. That is basically where the year starts. And I'm going to do the FF tour. I'm going to take the Ferrari FF on a tour, about 2.5 weeks, driving around, hopefully find some snow, but more or less that's going to take out the whole of March on the road in the FF. So I think you'll probably be a little bit overloaded with the car by then, and probably not wanting to see it straight after when I set off on the Where's Shmee tour. So every year I do Where's Shmee, about 3 or 4 weeks on the road, down to Top Marks, Monaco. This year I want to take the McLaren and the Aston, but I don't want to drive either of those cars on the motorway. They are not long-distance motorway cars, and I've done so many miles on this car already. It's 6,000, which might not sound like loads, but it's not even 6 months old, and I doubt there is probably another LT Spider out there that's done more. I mean, maybe there'll be some press ones and test ones, but probably not customer cars. And if there are, fair play to you. If you've done it, you are amazing. So I was thinking about another car to drive on that trip. I don't really want to take the Focus RS because I use that kind of as my daily and my backup, and I obviously don't want to take the Mini. That's like my London City play around car, not a 3,000 or 4,000 mile road trip car. So I'm kind of thinking if I take the FF, it's quite repetitive. I'll just have got back from 2.5 weeks in the car, so it might be fun to take something else. And the lights have just turned off on me, so let me walk this way. There we go, it's turning back on. So I was thinking about it from that perspective. Then almost straight after that, it's May. We've got Fuel Faction Due in Italy in May. Another trip with my team members, maybe some friends this time. We'll be heading around Italy, finding some of the best roads, having an amazing time. And again, I'm not sure which cars to take, but I want to take multiple. So I was thinking, well, it might involve a new one. If I bought a new one, it will probably involve at least 1 or 2 others of my cars as well. Then we get to June. I've got a couple of private rallies and events with friends, traveling again all the way around Europe. We've got Streetgasm as well. July, more private stuff, basically just rallies and road trips. And I'm going to do something like, it must be 15,000 miles, maybe even 20,000 miles in those months. So I need to be quite sensible about this. And I know it sounds silly, but if I were to do, let's say 15,000 miles in 1 year in my LT Spider, not only does it diminish how special it is, because I'm driving it so much that it becomes normal, but it also destroys the value of the car, and I have to be slightly conscious. I want to enjoy them, share them, and I do take them to tracks, to mountain roads, to road trips, to events, as you know, but I need to be a little bit sensible about it. Anyway, moving on, and we're now down at the FF. You can tell there's a pretty busy calendar ahead of me. So I've sort of been thinking more about this, and really my two special cars, the McLaren and the Aston Martin, those are both sort of long-term, highly bespoke, custom cars to me that I really want to be able to appreciate and enjoy for a long time to come. Something like the FF, the Focus RS, they're not long-termers for me. I'm using them an awful lot. This is my sort of luxury daily, and the Focus RS, I guess, is my actual daily. And I'm doing too many miles even in both of these. That's probably the scariest thing for me. I mean, obviously you put your mileage on your insurance, so I have to quote a high number to start, and that already had me worried, and I'm coming up on it very, very quickly. Both cars probably doing, well, at least 5 figures a year, more than 10,000 miles a year, which especially on something like this is quite concerning. So the other reason I can't take the FF on everything is because if I did 20,000 miles in 1 year on the FF, kiss goodbye to an awful lot of money, plus it has to go in for servicing. If you think about it, I have to basically somehow work out how to drop the car off for a couple of weeks to get various servicing bits done somehow in the middle of this tour, or these tours, which is virtually impossible. Logistically, it can't be done. So I mentioned that I sort of see the idea of leaving the Focus RS at home so that it's always there, it's always sort of around and reliable. The Mini at home because I just don't want to take it. The McLaren and the Aston going on trucks. But it leaves a sort of void for another car to share the duties with the FF. To not be doing it all in one, and to not be sharing every single, I literally just said one, I did two, didn't I? But to not be doing it all in one, and to have two cars to share all of that out and split it across, basically giving a variety to the content as well. Shuffling on again, and we're at the Mini. Now you might have noticed that all of the cars are currently quite clean and tidy, but the problem with keeping them in a garage like this is that with all of the air circulation, eventually they get quite dusty, then you take them outside into the inevitably drizzly British weather, and as soon as you run the windscreen wipers once, they look a mess. So that's why I was talking about getting more covers. But it also leads me on quite nicely to the other thing about not driving them, or at least you guys thinking that sometimes I don't drive the cars. Now what basically happens is that sometimes I leave cars and don't use them for a while, then immediately I take them and pump on tons of miles. So over the year, they do lots, they go to loads of events, loads of tracks, loads of fun things, and some proper driving. But certainly for periods, it comes across like they don't, or sometimes they actually don't. So recently, obviously, you saw I was in Scotland with the FF. I did about 1,100, 1,200 miles in 4 or 5 days, but just before that, it had basically done 100 miles in the previous 8 weeks, 2 months, something like that. So that's kind of my normal rotation. So I know it looks like sometimes I'm not driving them, but I think overall I'm doing an awful lot. The final one then, the Focus RS, the daily driver, the only filthy car out of all of mine at the moment because I've been using it all the time, especially days like today when the weather is atrocious. But this car I have found I drive so much more than I actually thought I would when I bought it because it is genuinely enjoyable and easy to use all the time. Now I would take this on more of my road trips, but it's not quite super. As much as it is fun, it's not a supercar, which means it's not always welcome at some of the events and things I'll be wanting to go to. That is why, and we've kind of gone round in a full circle, we are here talking about the AMG GT and the AMG GTS. Now the comment above all others that I have taken on board from you guys is that if I was to do it, if I was to buy one now and trade it back in 6 months, part exchange it back when I get the GTR, it would take away some of the specialness that's going to be coming with the GTR. Yes, the game has moved on. The GTR has 75 horsepower more, it has rear wheel steering, it's lighter, and it's basically a completely different beast to drive. But I'll have got familiar with the interior, the shape of it, the style, the GT characteristics, the length of the bonnet, and I won't have all of that. And that is something I hadn't necessarily thought too much about, and I definitely am taking very seriously into consideration. Another thing I want to talk about is the cost of it. And a lot of people are like, why would you waste your money? But the thing you have to actually remember is that if I do the drives in the GT or in a GTS, it actually saves money versus doing the drives in the LT, the GT8 or the FF, because those all cost so much on servicing and running costs and depreciation. That's the big one. The long term, buying a GT with cash I obviously already have ready to buy the GTR, because that's going to be coming down the line, actually doesn't lose much. The car will depreciate, but only a small chunk relative, and that's the most important thing to think about, because I think a lot of people have seen it as a cost exercise, where in reality, at the end of the day, I end up with an extra car to play around with, which, let's face it, is fun, and I'll have saved some money relative, as well as creating more content with different cars. So we've kind of gone in a big circle and we're back up now at the GT8, but I hope I've gone a little way towards explaining what I'm thinking here. The future may or may not have an AMG GT or GTS in my content. It may or may not have something completely different, and I'm open to any ideas you may have for a car that can sort of sit alongside the FF as an enjoyable GT car for this long distance driving, and that's basically what this boils down to, motorway miles. Something like this is not a car for sitting on the motorway. I mean, I regularly go on these drives, 2,000 miles across Europe, let's say, and something like the GT8 and the LT Spider just should not be used for this purpose. Every mile driven in this car should be a mile I enjoy and a mile I really, really appreciate. The experience of it should not be diminished by getting familiar with it and using it for mundane tasks. I will take these cars to Top Marks Monaco, to different kinds of events. You will see them out and about being driven, but I want to do the journey and go via the stop points when I'm filming other content in something that is also fun, but not so ridiculous on the sort of cost sides and exclusivity side. So this is where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking about, what I'm considering, and why I did this sort of piece and where my thoughts are at in the first place. It might not end up costing me any more money, and it might mean in the process I'm able to drive another car. And let's face it, if you had that option available to you, you'd probably take it too, if you're into your cars, that is, I'm sure. The other thing I need to work out though is where on earth am I going to put them all? What am I going to do with the cars so they're not just pointlessly dotted around an underground garage? Because I want them all lined up, looking awesome, so I'm working on that as well. But basically, this is it. Should I buy an AMG GTS? I think the answer to that might well be no, but I want to go for another little drive, learn a bit more about it as well in due course, to think about it a bit more. But I guess also it's been done quite a lot through Paul Supercars of London's car, so you've probably seen, if you follow him too, an awful lot of that content. But for me, hopefully I've touched a little bit there on the things you're wondering. If not, I'll try and get back to you in the comments. But that is it for now. Thank you very much for being so patient and sticking with me here, and I'll catch up with you again very soon. Cheers!